debts, threats, and looming dangers. One night, a young nurse witnesses a life-or-death struggle. She saves a life, but that moment will change her fate forever. Is this her salvation, or the sign of a brand new beginning? Mel, 32 years old, was struggling to survive with her 2 young children. Working as a nurse at the hospital, she often stayed for long shifts, only to return home to a night filled with anxiety and fear. Her once happy life had been shattered by her husband's gambling debts. Her husband had disappeared after being unable to pay off his debts, leaving Mel alone to face the burden and danger of it all. On top of that, the mortgage on their house wasn't even paid off. The debt kept piling up, and threatening letters filled the mailbox day after day. Debt collectors searching for her husband would occasionally show up in sleek black cars, driving through the neighborhood and glancing around suspiciously, their eyes often fixed on her house. Though Mel tried to avoid their cold stares, fear gnawed at her. Every time the doorbell rang, she would tremble, trying her best to hide it from her kids. "Mom, who's at the door?" the little voices would ask. She always tried to stay calm and replied gently, "Oh, it's nothing, sweetheart. Probably a wrong address." But her heart would race faster every single time. The only person Mel could rely on was her neighbor across the street, Connie. Connie was an elderly woman who lived alone but had a kind heart and was always willing to help. To Mel, she was a lifeline. Whenever Mel had to work, she knew she could safely leave her children with Connie. The older woman sympathized with Mel's struggles and supported her as much as she could. "Oh, sweetheart. It's just not fair for a mother like you to have to fight so hard," Connie would often say. Each morning, as Mel dropped her kids off at daycare, the gray clouds in the sky seemed to weigh her down even more. On her way to work, her mind constantly swirled with worry, debts, threats, creditors. But she knew she had to fight through it all, no matter what, for the safety of her children. Would these dark days ever end? Or would the problems continue to grow, slowly pulling Mel further into despair? Mel still couldn't wrap her head around how much her once trusted husband had changed over the years. The man she had admired, loving and responsible, had succumbed to a gambling addiction, dragging their family into a pit of debt. Lost in these thoughts, she woke up early that morning. She had a night shift ahead, so she packed meals and snacks for herself and the kids before leaving the house. On the way to daycare, she asked Connie to pick the kids up later. Mel knew she could never repay Connie for everything she had done. When she arrived at the hospital, she quickly put on her scrubs and got to work. The day was hectic, giving her no time to stop and think. Patients needed her full attention, and she moved from one task to the next without a break. But in the afternoon, a notice came from hospital administration about a mandatory meeting. Mel's name was on the attendee list. Without knowing what it was about, she went to the meeting. The administrators, looking grim, started speaking. This was a private hospital, and they were facing serious financial difficulties. When they announced the need for budget cuts, Mel felt a knot tighten in her chest. They explained that unfortunately some employees would be let go. Then the list of affected staff members began to be read aloud. Mel's name was on it. She froze in shock. She had been laid off. It was a sudden decision. The hospital had lost a major donor and could no longer cover its expenses. Mel stared blankly ahead, her mind racing. Every hope she had left shattered in that moment. Mel sat frozen in the hospital meeting room for a while. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Everything in her life seemed to have unraveled right here in this small room. The one thing she had thought she could rely on, her job, had now been taken away from her. The administrators' voices sounded distant, as if coming from far away, while other employees glanced at one another and whispered. But all Mel could hear were her own silent, screaming thoughts echoing inside her head. "My job. It's gone," she whispered to herself. A tightness gripped her chest. She thought of her children. How would she tell them? She was already drowning under the weight of debt. How was she supposed to keep going under these circumstances? Images of her children flashed through her mind. She had done everything she could to keep them safe, but now their security was at greater risk than ever. The colleague sitting beside her leaned in and whispered, "Mel, are you okay?" Mel took a deep breath and gave a small nod. "I'm fine," she managed to say, though nothing about her felt fine. She made her way to the staff room and began gathering her belongings from her locker. As she slung her bag over her shoulder, she paused, trying to steady herself. "I have to be strong. I have to stay standing. For the kids," she murmured. But no matter how many times she repeated the words, they brought her no comfort. When she stepped outside, the cold morning air hit her face. The streets were quiet, with only a light snowfall blanketing everything in white. Mel walked slowly, her eyes welling up with tears. As they streamed down her face, she didn't even try to wipe them away. She had no idea what to do. Life had backed her into a corner once again. Her thoughts drifted to Connie. Should she tell Connie about this? Or should she focus on the kids first? Her emotions were a tangled mess as she made her way home. Another battle lay ahead. But this time it was going to be tougher than she had ever imagined. Mel was walking home, her mind crowded with overwhelming thoughts. The growing fear and uncertainty in her heart slowed her steps. Her eyes were fixed blankly on the ground as she felt lost beneath the falling snow. How was she going to tell the children and Connie that she had lost her job? How long would it take to find new work with the debt already suffocating her? Lost in these worries, she trudged even more slowly. The cold air stung her face but couldn't freeze the tears running down her cheeks. The silent echo of her tears pressed heavily on her spirit. She decided to take a longer route home, eventually turning onto a deserted street. The entire road was blanketed in white. The dim streetlights cast a faint glow on the snow-covered ground. For a brief moment, Mel hoped that the calm of her surroundings might ease her mind. But that was short-lived. Just then, a movement caught her attention. A sleek black car slowly appeared at the other end of the street. Her heart started racing. She squinted, focusing on the vehicle. Is it them again? She wondered. Debt collectors searching for her husband had come to the neighborhood in similar cars before. An unfamiliar but deeply unsettling fear gripped her body once again, and a cold sweat trickled down her back. But something unexpected happened this time. The car suddenly started to swerve. The road was clearly iced over, and the tires skidded wildly as the vehicle spun out of control. Mel held her breath. No, they're losing control, she muttered, panic rising in her voice. The car continued to slide at high speed until it finally slammed into a large tree on the side of the road. The crash echoed eerily through the quiet street. Mel's body reacted instinctively, her concern and adrenaline kicking in. She started running, her footsteps crunching through the snow as she picked up speed. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. As she neared the vehicle, the smell of gasoline and smoke hit her nose. The front of the car was crumpled, and one of the windows had completely shattered. In the driver's seat, a man probably in his late 40s or early 50s, was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. Mel hurried to the door and tried to open it, but it was jammed. Gritting her teeth, she pulled with all her strength until it finally gave way with a loud creak. She leaned in and saw blood trickling from the man's forehead, running down his cheek. Is he alive? She wondered, panic settling in. She checked his pulse and breathing. His breaths were shallow and his pulse was weak. As her eyes scanned him, she noticed his shirt was torn open, revealing discomfort around his chest. This might be a heart attack, she said under her breath. Acting quickly, she carefully pulled the man out of the vehicle, supporting his neck and spine as she laid him gently on the snow. Her hands moved steadily as she checked his pulse again. I don't have much time. I need to act fast, she muttered, pulling out her phone to dial 911. There's an injured man, possibly having a heart attack. She reported quickly before slipping the phone back into her pocket. The ambulance was on its way, but the man's condition was critical. Without hesitation, Mel began CPR. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. She kept up the steady rhythm of chest compressions, her lips numbing from the cold. The wind scattered snowflakes across her face, stinging her cheeks like tiny shards of ice. Hold on. Don't give up, she whispered softly. The street was completely silent, no cars, no people. Only Mel's desperate efforts echoed in the stillness. Time felt like it was crawling. The adrenaline pumping through her veins kept her warm, but the cold was beginning to wear her down. Where's the ambulance? She thought anxiously, just as distant sirens broke the silence. Mel exhaled deeply as the sound grew louder. Moments later, the ambulance pulled up beside them, its flashing lights illuminating the street. Paramedics rushed out, and Mel quickly explained the situation. Some of the team members recognized her from her previous job at the hospital. One of them gave her a sorrowful look and said, "Mel, we're really sorry." Mel lowered her head slightly, unable to respond. They carefully placed the man on a stretcher and loaded him into the ambulance. The vehicle sped off, its sirens echoing through the cold air. Mel stood frozen in place for a moment, taking deep, steadying breaths. The events that had just unfolded played over and over in her mind. Her heart was still racing. She clasped her trembling hands together, the cold making her fingers numb. After standing in silence for a while, she finally collected herself. I need to go to Connie. I need to tell her everything, she thought. Slowly, she began walking towards Connie's house. It would take time to process her emotions, but at least she wouldn't have to face this alone. When she reached the door, she took a deep breath and knocked softly. As soon as Connie opened the door, she noticed Mel's tear-streaked face. "Weren't you supposed to be on shift? What happened?" she asked with concern. Mel shook her head, unable to speak. Connie, not wanting the children to see Mel like this, left the door slightly ajar and pulled her into a comforting hug. "Don't worry, we'll get through this," she said softly. "Connie, I can't take it anymore. What am I going to do?" Mel said between sobs. Connie gently held her and rubbed her back soothingly. "You're not going to give up. You'll stay strong for your kids." "Did you lose your job?" she asked. Mel nodded. "Yes. It had to happen," she whispered. Connie gave her a reassuring smile. "You'll find a new job soon. In the meantime, I'll be here to support you," she said with a calm, confident tone. Mel wiped her tears and looked at Connie with gratitude. "Thank you so much. I honestly don't know what I'd do without you," she said sincerely. Connie smiled warmly. "We're here for each other. Everything will work out," she said, gently inviting Mel inside. After spending some time with the kids, Mel fell asleep on the couch at Connie's house. Connie quietly covered her with a blanket and watched her with sad eyes. The next morning, when Mel woke up, the weight of the previous day came crashing down on her. Her thoughts were interrupted by Connie's cheerful voice. "Good morning. I fed the kids and dropped them off at daycare. Today is the first day of your new life. Maybe things will start getting better from here," she said, handing Mel a cup of coffee. Mel sighed, her voice filled with despair. "How can you be so positive?" she asked. Connie looked her in the eyes and said softly, "When I lost my husband, I realized there are very few things worth staying sad over. Don't lose hope. Sometimes kindness comes from the most unexpected places." Mel drew strength from those words and thanked Connie before heading off to get ready. She spent the entire day searching for a job. But neither the clinics nor the hospitals were hiring. A few places took down her number, but Mel knew deep down they wouldn't call. Exhausted and discouraged, she began the long walk home. As Mel turned onto the street where both her and Connie's houses were, she froze. Her heart started pounding wildly. 4 sleek black cars were parked in front of her house, and several men in black suits with stern expressions stood around them. A chill ran down her spine. These were definitely her husband's creditors. No. This can't be happening," she whispered to herself. She quickly scanned the area. The lights in Connie's house were on, but terrible scenarios flashed through her mind. Connie and the kids. They could be in danger. With panic rising, she began to run. However, she had barely taken a few steps when a man in a suit suddenly blocked her path. He spoke in a cold, firm voice. "Hey, where do you think you're going? Who are you?" Fear and anger surged through Mel. "This is my house. Get out of my way," she shouted, her voice cracking slightly. She didn't back down though. All she could think about was the safety of her children and Connie. Her eyes darted toward Connie's house. "Connie? Connie?" she called out, but the man in front of her stood motionless as if he hadn't heard a thing. Just then, someone stepped out of Connie's house, a tall man with a serious presence. "Let her go," he said calmly but with unmistakable authority. The man blocking Mel hesitated for a moment before finally stepping aside. Mel's mind raced with questions. What's going on? Did they hurt Connie? Where are the kids? Without wasting another second, she ran toward the house and burst through the front door. What she saw left her stunned. Connie was calmly pouring tea in the kitchen. "Oh, Mel. Welcome back," she said cheerfully. The children were in the living room watching cartoons, their laughter echoing throughout the house. A man in a black suit stood silently by the door, keeping watch. At the dining table, another man sat quietly. His face was familiar, but Mel couldn't immediately place him. She squinted, focusing on the man. Wait. That's him. In that moment, everything clicked. He was the man she had saved after the car accident just days ago. She stood frozen in shock, trying to process it all. Connie noticed her confusion and spoke gently. "Don't worry, Mel. Come sit down and have some tea. We'll explain everything," she said softly. Mel's mind buzzed with countless questions, but for now, all she could do was take a deep breath and try to calm herself. Slowly, she stepped over the threshold and fixed her eyes on the man at the table. Tonight, she would learn much more than she had ever expected. The man stood up and extended his hand politely. "I'm Christopher Carter," he said kindly. "You saved my life and I wanted to personally thank you. My assistants got your address from your colleagues, but when we couldn't find you at home, we came here." Mel froze for a moment in shock. She still couldn't fully grasp what was happening. Connie, noticing the fear on Mel's face, spoke gently. Mel, I didn't want you to be scared. They're just here to express their gratitude. Mel took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I'm sorry. I thought, she stammered. Connie stepped in to ease the tension. Come on, let's have some tea, she said encouragingly. Mel, feeling slightly more at ease, sat down. The children were still watching cartoons, their laughter creating a peaceful atmosphere in the house. Christopher took a seat across from Mel and began speaking calmly. The doctors told me that you saved my life. Apparently, I had a heart attack while driving. If you hadn't been there, I probably wouldn't have made it. Mel lowered her head slightly, humbly replying, I was just doing my duty. Christopher studied her intently. Mel, I've met many people throughout my life and career, but not everyone is like you. Finding someone so brave, selfless, and compassionate is rare. Trying to lighten the mood, Mel smiled faintly and asked, So, what do you do for a living? You should stay away from stress. Connie chimed in with a playful grin. Everyone should stay away from stress, really? Christopher chuckled softly but then turned serious. Listen, Mel, he said. I'm truly grateful to you. Also, when my staff found out that you had been laid off, they were deeply upset. And on the same day that accident happened. Connie interrupted with a laugh. Oh yes, when they showed up, my first reaction was to try and chase them off. Mel turned to Connie in disbelief. Connie, seriously? Connie shrugged sheepishly. What was I supposed to do, Mel? I thought they were dangerous men like those fancy cars that have been driving around the neighborhood, she explained, lowering her gaze. So I had to explain the situation to them. Christopher smiled gently. And I'm glad she did, he said. Mel, I'm here to help you get out of this difficult situation. Mel took a deep breath, still processing what was happening. Thank you, but I can take care of myself, she replied, her voice tinged with pride. Christopher spoke politely but firmly. Of course. But these kinds of problems are much easier for someone like me to handle. Let me help you. Connie couldn't hold back and reached for Mel's hand. Mel, we have to accept this help. This is important for you and the kids, she said earnestly. Mel remained quiet for a moment, contemplating her next move, before finally looking at Christopher. All right. What exactly are you offering? She asked cautiously. Christopher responded with a calm and clear tone. I'll pay off all your husband's debts, cover the rest of your mortgage, ensure that you and your children can live safely, and provide security for you for a while. Mel's eyes widened in shock. She almost forgot to breathe. That's too much, she exclaimed. Christopher gave a gentle nod and replied with sincerity. You saved my life, Mel. I owe you. Mel took a deep breath and nodded. All right. But when I find a job, I want to repay you. Little by little, she said, her voice serious. Christopher smiled and gave her a slight nod. Mel, you don't owe me anything. And as for the job, I can help with that too. I have a friend who owns a private hospital. Let me talk to him and we'll get back to you, he said, his eyes meeting hers with reassurance. Remember, Mel, it's not you who owes me. It's the other way around, he added. He stood up, ready to leave. Approaching Connie, he gave her a warm smile. It's truly been a pleasure meeting you, he said sincerely. Connie returned the gesture with unusual warmth. Mel couldn't help but notice the sudden spark between the two. She gave Connie a wide-eyed look as if to say, What's going on with you? Connie quickly averted her gaze, smiling softly. Christopher turned toward one of his security guards near the door and spoke in a firm tone, You'll be stationed across from this house. Until the debts are paid and the house is fully secured, you'll protect Mel, Connie, and the kids. The guards nodded in compliance. After saying his goodbyes, Christopher got into his car, while one of the security guards took his position inside a nearby vehicle. Mel and Connie moved into the kitchen. Still in shock, Mel blurted out, Connie, what just happened? I still can't believe any of this. Connie chuckled lightly. I told you, sometimes kindness comes from the most unexpected places. I know you're proud, but let the man help you a little. Look at the kids, she said, gesturing toward the living room where the children were happily playing. You saved his life. It's only natural that he wants to help. Mel sighed and shrugged. This isn't just a little help, Connie. This is huge, she replied. Connie giggled and shook her head. Maybe not so huge for him, she teased. Mel raised an eyebrow and smirked. But I saw how you looked at him. What was that, Connie? Connie blushed slightly and admitted shyly, What can I say? I liked him. She looked away embarrassed. Mel burst into laughter. Well, that was unexpected, she said, still chuckling. Connie shrugged with a sheepish smile, though the expression on her face said it all. The next morning, while Mel was having breakfast with the kids, the doorbell rang. When Connie answered it, she was greeted by Christopher standing there with a large bouquet of flowers. Her eyes widened in surprise. What's this?" she stammered. Christopher smiled warmly and handed her the flowers. "I wanted to thank you. And I needed an excuse to see you again," he said softly. Connie's face turned bright red. Mel, watching from the kitchen, struggled to hold in her laughter. "Connie, I think someone's got a crush on you," she whispered teasingly. Connie shot her a look and said, "Mel, stop it," but couldn't hide her smile. Christopher stepped inside and turned to Mel. "Mel, I have good news. I've arranged a position for you at my friend's private hospital. They're expecting you. Also, the debts have been fully paid off, and the house is now officially yours," he said warmly. Tears welled up in Mel's eyes. "Thank you. I'll never forget this," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Christopher nodded with a gentle smile. "You saved my life, Mel. This is just a small gesture of gratitude." Connie, still holding the flowers, stood frozen in surprise. Mel couldn't resist teasing her. "Connie, I think you might have someone special in your life now," she said with a grin. Christopher playfully added, "I hope you're not allergic to flowers. That would really ruin the plan," causing everyone to burst into laughter. The house was filled with warmth and joy that day. Mel's darkest days were behind her. As she looked forward to a secure future with her children, Connie also seemed to radiate the excitement of a new beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. Your thoughts matter, so share them in the comments. You can also support us with a super like. See you in the next story.